toward the one, the perfection of love, harmony, and beauty, the only being, united with all the illuminated souls who form the embodiment of the Master, the Spirit of guidance.
Thank you. And let's attune to our breath and breathing the elemental breaths, the healing breaths, the purification breaths. Breathing in Ya Shafi, breathing out Ya Kafi. The breath of earth, breathing in and out through the nose. And connecting, opening ourselves towards stability around us and within us. Breathing in Ya Shafi, breathing out Ya Kafi, the breath of water, breathing in through the nose and breathing out through the mouth, connecting, opening up towards fluidity around us and within us. Breathing in Ya Shafi, breathing out Ya Kafi, the breath of fire, breathing in through the mouth and breathing out through the nose, opening towards connecting with warmth around us and within us. Breathing in Ya Shafi, breathing out Ya Kafi, the breath of air, breathing in and out through the mouth, connecting ourselves to opening up towards the vastness around us and within us. And breathing in Ya Shafi, breathing out Ya Kafi, the breath of ether, breathing through the nose or whatever way is natural for you, opening all our breathing capacities, opening up towards connecting with capacity around us and within us. And releasing the concentration on the words, returning to our natural breath and breathing. And one more time with a recording happening. Welcome to you all to this 9th Unveiling the Beloved, to the 9 nights of the goddess in the Hindu way of living, to, as far as I know, 2 nights into the new moon, to autumn, harvesting. So these 9 nights of the goddess are connected to Saraswati, Durga, and Lakshmi. And I was on my research in fairy tales looking for the divine feminine qualities of these 3 goddesses in those heroes in the fairy tales. I was looking for music. I was looking for teaching. I was looking for beauty. I was looking for taking action. I was looking for the wisdom, the love, fortune. I was looking for giving birth, bringing something to this earth, all these beautiful, wonderful qualities that are connected to these 3 goddesses. And in the fairy tales of the Brother Grimm, I'm also very connected to those roots of a common soul, a common soul pictures, as we call them, that are connected to our heritage here. And so I'm inviting you on this path with these fairy tales. And the first one that I'm going to tell is a story that starts like many stories starts. Once upon a time, there was a king who had 3 daughters. He desired to find out which of the 3 loved him the most. So he called them forth and posed the question to each, "How much do you love me?" The first said that she loved him more than the whole kingdom. The second, that she loved him more than all the jewels and pearls in the world. When the third daughter declared that she loved him more than salt, he flew into a rage. Then he ordered his servant to carry the little girl into the woods and kill her. Yet when they reached the lonely wood, the servant told her that he was devoted to her and would not have killed her under any circumstances. He was delighted to agree to her plan, that he make her a cloak of mouse skins and leave her to make her own way. When it was done, the girl wrapped herself in it and went straight to the neighboring king and asked for employment. She had cut her hair short and said she was a boy, and the king believed her and took her on as his personal servant. Now it was the king's habit, when taking his boots off at night, to throw them at his serving boy's head. One night the king asked the lad in mouse skins where he had come from, and the young one replied, "From a country where one doesn't toss boots at people's heads." From that moment, the king was suspicious of the boy and set the other servants to spying on him. When they discovered a ring in the mouse skins boy's chamber, they brought it to the king. It was of such value that they thought he had stolen it. The king called Mouseskin to him and asked how he obtained the ring. That's when she realized that she could not hide herself any longer. She unwrapped the mouseskin and her golden hair streamed down. As she stepped out of the skin, he could see she was beautiful indeed, so beautiful that he immediately took off his crown, put it on her head, and declared her to be his wife. A grand wedding was celebrated, and all of the neighboring kings, including Mouseskin's very own father, were invited. But although the guests were entertained with the most delicious wines, the most graceful dancers, and the most elegant dishes, the food itself seemed to have no taste. One king became irritated and said, "I'd rather die than eat such food." No sooner had he uttered those words than his daughter, the new queen, came to his side. That is when she said, "Well, now you say you can't live without salt. But when I said I loved you more than salt, you wanted to have me killed." And all of a sudden, the grumpy old king realized that this young woman was none other than his youngest daughter, who he had believed to be long dead. In joy, he kissed her and begged for forgiveness. Now that he had found her again, she was more dear to him than his kingdom and all the jewels in the world. So let's start with some Bismillah, breathing Bismillah. Breathing in Bismillah, breathing out Bismillah. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. 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 Rahman Rahim. Bismillah Rahman Rahim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you, Sára.
Thank you, Khabir. Rahima and I are singing along with you. I wish you could hear it. Oh, beautiful friends. Thank you, Khabir, for getting us started on our attunements to this beautiful festival of the goddess, the Navaratri, which is the name for this festival. I first started realizing the breakdown of this word that means literally it's the 9 nights. And if you go to an Indian restaurant, Indian food restaurant, you can find sometimes on some menus there's something called the Navratan korma, which is a particular curried dish that has the word Navratan, that means 9 jewels, that which is like there are 9 ingredients in this. It's not necessarily, but that's an indication about what it is. And so it's the same root as 9, the Navrat, and then the Ratri is the same as, you've probably heard this on the Mahashivaratri, that is the great night of Shiva. And so the Ratri at the end of it is the night, so 9 nights of the divine feminine. So we're going to go through this process, and we're just going to pretend that we're condensing our 9 nights of the Goddess Festival into 2 hours of our Zoom session today. So the first 3 nights are dedicated to Saraswati, and Saraswati is the goddess of wisdom and music and all of the arts of language and the visual arts and also dancing. And she's, let's see, is this true? I don't know if that's true. She has a lot of power and is often depicted in her own autonomy. Some of the depictions of the divine feminine are often depicted with a masculine consort or counterpart, but Saraswati is always just on her own, doing her own thing. She does have a masculine counterpart, but we don't need to talk about him. So she rides on a swan. I love that she rides on a swan because when I was a child, I loved swans, partially because I was obsessed with ballet and the Swan Lake Association, and they're just so graceful, but they are rude. Just so you know, swans are kind of rude. Okay, let's sing a bit, shall we? This throughout the course of our unveiling today, I'm going to bring 3 melodies, one for each of the goddesses in the Navaratri festival. And these particular melodies have accompanying dances that were put together by our friend Shivadam. So I'll go through the music for the Saraswati one first, and then I think that I'll take a moment to show you the movements so that you can have a physical embodiment of invoking her wisdom and her guidance. And just a moment while I figure out how to use a computer over here. They're the words for it. We'll sing Om Shri Saraswati Ayi. Om Shri Saraswati Ayi. And when we say Om, we're attuning to the vibration of creation, of everything that ever was, is, or will be. Shri is a syllable, a phrase of veneration, of tremendous respect, of acknowledging with reverence this entity. And Saraswati, her name is Saraswati, and we add the yi at the end of it that indicates that we are singing directly to her. We're not singing about her, we're not gossiping, we're having a direct conversation with Saraswati. Then we say Namo, 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 Namah. And the Namo and Nama have the same meaning, that are a bowing to or being empty of self before this entity. And in the Sanskrit, when we say Namo with an O at the end, that's a hint that we're going to say it again. That means there's more. So then we say it again, Namo. That means we have to say it again. And then we say Namo, and we have to say it again. The last one, putting the H at the end, either as a Nama or a Namaha, same indication at the end. That means that's the last one. That's the punctuation point on this mantra. So we'll say Om Shri Saraswati Ayi. Namo, 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 Namah. Okay. Let's see, where are we? Om Shri Saraswati Ayi. Namo, 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 Namah. Om Shri Saraswati Ayi. Namo, 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 Namah. Om Shri Saraswati Ayi. That you got the words and the melody, okay? We'll do them more and more. So we begin with the hands in front of the heart, and they're open like a book, like we have an empty, blank-paged book in our heart, in the center of our own beings. And we start out by singing Om Shri Saraswati Ayi with the hands in this receptive gesture, and then we close them into a prayer mudra, an indication of our devotion and that we have accepted and received her guidance and her wisdom. Namo, 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 Namah, like that. Om Shri Saraswati Ayi. Namo, 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 Namah. Om Shri Saraswati Ayi. Namo, 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 Namah. When the melody goes up, so do our hands, that we're receiving her guidance and her wisdom from wherever it is that can stream down into us. So my hands are up, open like this, so I'm just creating myself as a pure, open channel, funneling her guidance into myself, and then I'm going to bring my hands together and draw that into my heart. So Om Shri Saraswati Ayi. Namo, 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 Namah. Om Shri Saraswati Ayi. Namo, 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 Namah. Open book. Om Shri Saraswati Ayi. Namo, Namo, Namo. So far this morning, I'm very pleased that all of the noisy sounds in the neighborhood are in a really pleasing harmony with what's being sung and spoken on our Zoom. That's always nice when that happens, isn't it? It's like, that one is a little bit dissonant, but that feels somehow appropriate. All right, so here is a brief reading from Piro Murshid Hazrat Inayat Khan on the topic of guidance that is found in the silence. This is from volume 4 of the message volumes. It is noise which hinders a voice that we hear from a distance. And it is the troubled waters of a pool which hinder us seeing our own image reflected in the water. When the water is still, it takes a clear reflection. And when our atmosphere is still, then we hear that voice which is constantly coming to the heart of every person. We are looking for guidance. We, all of us, search for truth. We search for the mystery. The mystery is in ourselves. The guidance is in our own souls. Would you like to hear it again? It is noise which hinders a voice that we hear from a distance. And it is the troubled waters of a pool which hinder us seeing our own image reflected in the water. When the water is still, it takes a clear reflection. And when our atmosphere is still, then we hear that voice which is constantly coming to the heart of every person. We are looking for guidance. We, all of us, search for truth. We search for the mystery. The mystery is in ourselves. The guidance is in our own souls. So, I'd like to take you into a partial shuggle practice. That is Piro Murshid's instructions about, he didn't make these things up, but these are the ways that he described them and conveyed them. That is really cultivating our inner awareness and tending to the spirit of guidance that is constantly unfolding within us. That there is never any pause in the flow of divine wisdom that is present and available to us, but we suck at listening to it. We do. We're so attracted to the outer world, to what's unfolding around us, and to the voice of our own ego selves. And so we forget to really invite ourselves into a stillness and a keen awareness to that inner voice. So here are 2 partial shuggle practices that help us draw our attention away from the distractions of the outer world and to tend to the inner. And we'll work with the senses of hearing and seeing individually. So the instruction is this. We're going to start with the sense of hearing. After I give the instruction, don't do it yet because you won't be able to hear me. After I give instructions, we'll be taking a full inhalation and then holding the ears closed very gently, holding the breath for precisely 2 seconds. Murshid wasn't that precise, but I'm saying like a very brief time. 2 seconds is just right. During that 2 seconds, we draw our attention toward hearing what's happening on the inside of our beings. And we recognize everything that we hear as the sound whoo. And then we let go of our ears and breathe out. And we'll do it again. So a total of 3 times. I'm not going to give all the other specific instructions because I think this is enough for now. So again, here's the reminder. We'll breathe in, hold the ears, hold the breath for 2 seconds, thinking, concentrating on the sound whoo, and then letting go and releasing. Are you ready? 3 times. Breathing in, Holding. Who. Breathing out, opening. And breathing in again. Holding. Who. Opening. One more time, breathing in. Holding. Who. And opening. That's it. That's a total of 6 seconds. And it's powerful if you wish to tend to it. All right, so the next one we're going to do is breathing in, closing the eyes, and don't press on your eyes at all, but place your fingers gently, very, very gently on your eyelids. Hold the breath for 2 seconds and then open again. While you're holding your breath this time, we're still concentrating on who, but we're drawing our eyesight inward and seeing anything that it is that we see with our eyes closed, and we recognize that as the vibration of who, as the light of God, who. Okay, so 2 seconds, we'll repeat it 3 times. Ready? Breathing in, closing, holding who, and opening. Again, breathing in, closing, holding who, opening. One more time, breathing in, closing and holding who, and opening. Tending to the wisdom, the light, and the vibration that is always present, always present. If we cultivate our awareness and our deliberate, receptive, open-heartedness to recognizing the wisdom of the great Mama God as it's unfolding all the time, every moment of our lives, without ceasing. Khabir.
So let's breathe in. I see in yellow, and breathe out thy love and thy light. I see in yellow, thy love and thy light. One more time. I see in yellow, thy love and thy light. And a third time. I see in yellow, thy love and thy light. A breathing concentration from the nature meditations from Hazrat Inayat Khan. Another way of connecting to the nature around us and within us. Another way of using the metaphor of nature that are given us by nature to connect ourselves with the nature within us and around us. So the next fairy tale is, I guess, one of the most famous and well-known fairy tales of the Brother Grimm. And most people don't know the ending. We have a certain idea and a certain picture of a certain fairy tale in our mind, in our heart. And this is the one picture that is enough to have. It's the one picture that we maybe should take a closer look at. Why is it that picture that we have in our heart? And this is one of my joys in reading and telling stories, to get more pictures and to see more pictures and to move them in myself. So I'm not going to tell you the title of the story because we're coming there pretty soon. So there once lived a man and his wife who had long wished for a child, but in vain. Now, there was at the back of their house a little window which overlooked a beautiful garden full of the finest vegetables and flowers. But there was a high wall around it, and no one ventured into it, for it belonged to a witch of great might, and of whom all the world was afraid. One day, the wife was standing at the window and looking into that garden, and she saw a bed filled with the finest rampion. Now, I need to have a little break here because I was looking for the word rampion in English. I never heard it. I mean, we in German, the story at this point says she saw Rapunzel standing in that garden. And that is a very, very old word to use for rampion. I don't know if you all know what rampion is. Well, it is Rapunzel flower, it's called. We call it corn salad or farm lettuce nowadays. In the old days, it was called Rapunzel. Now, I will keep on speaking of Rapunzel and not rampion. And you know what this woman is looking at, this wife is looking at when she's looking in the garden of that witch. So she saw a bed filled with the finest Rapunzel, and it looked so fresh and green that she began to wish for some. And at length she longed for it greatly. This went on for days, and as she knew she could not get the Rapunzel, she pined away and grew pale and miserable. Then the man was uneasy and asked, "What is the matter, dear wife?" "Oh," answered she, "I shall die unless I can have some of that Rapunzel to eat that grows in the garden at the back of our house." The man, who loved her very much, thought to himself, "Rather than lose my wife, I will get some Rapunzel, cost it what it will." So in the twilight, he climbed over the wall into the witch's garden, plucked hastily a handful of Rapunzel and brought it to his wife. She made a salad of it and ate of it to her heart's content. But she liked it so much and it tasted so good that the next day she longed for thrice as much as she had before. If she was to have any rest, the man must climb over the wall once more. So he went in the twilight again. And as he was climbing back, he saw all at once the witch standing before him and was terribly frightened as she cried with angry eyes, "How dare you climb over into my garden like a thief and steal my Rapunzel? It shall be the worst for you." "Oh," he answered, "be merciful rather than just. I have only done it through necessity, for my wife saw your Rapunzel out of the window and became possessed. So with great longing that she would rather die if she could not have some of the Rapunzel to eat." Then the witch said, "If it is all as you say, you may have as much Rapunzel as you like on one condition. The child that will come into the world must be given to me. It shall go well with the child, and I will care for it like a mother." In his distress of mind, the man promised everything, and when the time came, when the child was born, the witch appeared, and giving the child the name of Rapunzel, she took it away with her. Rapunzel was the most beautiful child in the world. When she was 12 years old, the witch shut her up in a tower in the midst of a wood, and it had neither steps nor door, only a small window above. When the witch wished to be let in, she would stand below and shout, "Oh, Rapunzel, oh, Rapunzel, let down your hair." Rapunzel had beautiful long hair that shone like gold. When she heard the voice of the witch, she would undo her hair, open the upper window, unbind the plaits of her hair, and let it down 20 ells below, and the witch would climb up by it. After they had lived like this for a few years, it happened that the king's son was riding through the wood. He came to the tower, and as he came closer, he heard a voice singing so sweetly that he stood still and listened. It was Rapunzel in her loneliness, trying to pass away the time with sweet songs. The king's son wished to go into that tower and sought to find a door, but there was none. So he rode home, but the song had entered into his heart, and every day he went into the wood and listened to it. Once, as he was standing there under a tree, he saw the witch come up and listened while she called out, "Oh, Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." Then he saw how Rapunzel let down her long tresses and how the witch climbed up by it and went into her. And he said to himself, "Since that is the ladder, I will climb it and seek my fortune." And the next day, as soon as it began to grow dusk, he went to the tower and cried, "Oh, Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." And she let down her hair, and the king's son climbed up by it. Rapunzel was greatly terrified when she saw that a man had come into her, for she had never seen one before. But the king's son began speaking so kindly to her and told how her singing had entered into his heart, so that he could have no peace until he had seen her herself. Then Rapunzel forgot her terror, and when he asked her to take him for her husband, and she saw that he was young and beautiful, she thought to herself, "I certainly like him much better than the old Mother Gothel." And she put her hand into his hand. Gothel is an old German word for godmother. She said, "I would willingly go with you, but I do not know how I shall get out. When thou comest, bring each time a silken rope, and I will make a ladder. And when it is quite ready, I will get down by it out of the tower, and you shall take me away on your horse." They agreed that he should come to her every evening, as the old woman came in the daytime. So the witch knew nothing of all of this, until once Rapunzel said to her unwittingly, "Mother Gothel, how is it that you climb up here so slowly, and the king's son is with me in a moment?" "Oh, wicked child," cried the witch, "what is this I hear? I thought I had hidden thee from all the world, and you have betrayed me." In her anger, she seized Rapunzel by her beautiful hair, struck her several times with her left hand, and then, grasping for a pair of scissors in her right, and snip, snap, the beautiful locks lay on the ground. And she was so hard-hearted that she took Rapunzel and put her in a waste and desert place, where she lived in misery. The same day on which she took Rapunzel away, she went back to the tower in the evening and made fast the severed locks of hair to the window hasp. And the king's son came and cried, Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair. Then she let down the hair, and the king's son climbed up. But how was he looking when he found that old witch standing in front of him instead of his dearest Rapunzel? Aha, cried she, mocking him, you came for your darling, but the sweet bird sits no longer in the nest and sings no more. The cat has got her and will scratch out your eyes as well. Rapunzel is lost to you. You will never see her again. The king's son was beside himself with grief, and in his agony, he sprang down from the tower. He escaped with his life, but the thorns on which he fell put out his eyes. Then he wandered blind through the wood, eating nothing but roots and berries, and doing nothing but lament and weep for the love of his dearest wife. So he wandered several years in misery, until at last he came to the desert place where Rapunzel lived with her twin children that she had borne, a boy and a girl. At first, he heard a voice that he thought he knew. And when he reached the place from which it seemed to come, Rapunzel recognized him and fell into his arms and wept. And when her tears touched his eyes, they became clear again, and he could see with them as well as ever. Then he took her to his kingdom, where he was received with great joy, and there they lived long and happily. So, just to let you know a little bit of the history of stories also. In the original story, Rapunzel was not speaking to the old witch. How do you take such a long time to climb up here? And the young prince is so quick. In the original story, she asked her old godmother, I don't know, my clothes are getting tighter and tighter. What is happening to me? And we all know, I guess, what happened to her. Let's sing a little La ilaha el Allahu, because it's all part of the one. All goddesses, all princes and princesses, all kings and queens, all servants, all witches, all of nature is part of the one. La ilaha illallahu, la ilaha illallahu, la ilaha illallahu, la ilaha Elahu, la ilaha, 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 Elahu. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Khabir. Oh, Murshid's melodic zikr. We should read some more of Murshid's words. Okay, so these are not the nice ones. These are not the kind and easy and squishy words. These are the, well, you'll see. We're going to move next into an attunement to Durga, and she's the destroyer. She's so awesomely ferocious. So here is a passage from Murshid on the theme of annihilation. Are you ready? So this is from volume 2, and the topic of this particular section is the ego. And I've just pulled out a couple of excerpts from it, so it's not the whole section, but I haven't changed anything. I've just highlighted some specific points. We read in the 10th Sufi thought that perfection is achieved by the annihilation of the false ego. The false ego is what does not belong to the real ego, and what that ego has wrongly conceived to be its own being. Did that make sense? Are you with me? Yeah, okay. When that is separated by analyzing life better, then the false ego is annihilated. A person has to analyze oneself and see, where does I stand? Does it stand as a remote, exclusive being? If it is a remote and exclusive being, then it must be found out. The whole spiritual process is to find this out. Did you get it? Thank you. Mirabai and Georgiana, I'm seeing the two of you in particular, so every time you nod or give me a thumbs up, I'm very grateful. The ego itself, this is another section, but it's in the same passage, it's a little bit further down. The ego itself is never destroyed. It is the one thing that lives. And this is the sign of eternal life. I know we're all confused right now, but it'll get more clear in a moment. The ego itself is never destroyed. It is the one thing that lives, and this is the sign of eternal life. In the knowledge of the ego, there is the secret of immortality. In the knowledge of the ego is the secret of immortality. The destroying of the ego is a word. It is not destroying, it is discovering. It is not destroying, it is discovering. Wow. I know, are you so excited right now? Often, people are afraid when reading Buddhist books where the interpretation of nirvana is given as annihilation. No one wants to be annihilated. Thank you, Murshid. No one wants to be annihilated. And people are very much afraid when they read annihilation. But it is only a matter of words. The Sufis call it fana. The Sufis call it fana. If we translate it into English, it is annihilation. But when we understand its real meaning, it is going through. Or passing through. Passing through what? Passing through the false conception, which is a first necessity, and arriving at the true realization. Here's that last part again. The Sufis call it fana. If we translate it into English, it is annihilation, but when we understand its real meaning, it is going through or passing through. Passing through what? Passing through the false conception, which is a first necessity, and arriving at the true realization. It's not actually destroying the ego, it is discovering the real self. Murshid is so clear that in order to realize anything that is true, we have to be willing to let go of all of our notions, whether they are true or not. He describes it as a process of unlearning, of taking everything that you know or think you know, I know, or think I know, and being willing to honestly and sincerely not just question it, but be willing to completely let it dissolve. That there is a Sufi instruction about being completely thorough in our approach to untangling the nafs. I said nafs with an F, but it could also be knots with a T, K-N-O-T, which is one of the translations or interpretations of nafs is the knots or the ties that keep us hooked into association and dependence on things of the world. Going through, passing through to what is ultimately real. Okay, so Durga. There are grasshoppers everywhere, and I'm just seeing them as like little six-legged manifestations of Durga. They're such destroyers, aren't they? The grasshoppers, where they just go like, and they're so cool. I like them, but I've had a couple of them have jumped and landed on my back, and I've decided I feel them land on my back, and I've let them stay. I'm like, all right, friend, go ahead. but Rahima saw one of them and took it off. All right, Durga. So here's the next song that we're gonna sing. Again, thank you to Shivadam, who put together these beautiful 3 melodies and dances for the 3 primary aspects of the Navaratri festival. So we'll sing Durga, 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 Jaya, Jaya, Ma. And Jaya is like victory or hail to, lots of praise and celebration and acknowledging the mightiness, the strength. And then Ma is often, not always, but often added to the name Durga. And there's an amazing story about Durga, who is the most ferocious goddess. She is just a brutal, badass warrior goddess that you see her. She's always in very dark colors and dark backgrounds, and she'll be on a battlefield with weapons which are always about destroying the ego. So she always has all of these weapons in her hands, and her tongue is always out in this very like long pointed tongue, and she often has blood dripping down her chin, and she has severed arms that are creating her skirt, or heads, or both. That I know, it's so ferocious and gruesome. I love her so much. And I'm not encouraging human beings to be like this, but she is always destroying the ego. She's not destroying anything that is good or that is lasting. But the story is that Durga is invoked in order to attain victory over the enemy, which is the ego, that is always in these stories, these teaching stories about how we approach ourselves. And so she is invoked onto the battlefield where we are engaged. If we are trying to be good and evolved and dedicated spiritual beings, we are always involved in this battle with the ego. And we lose. We are always losing the battle with the ego, because our personal limited self is such a slave to the ego that we want what the ego wants. The ego tells us this is what we want, and we're like, yes, that is what we want. So we lose the battle all the time. If we want to actually win the battle, we need to invoke this ferocious, powerful, unrelenting energy that is just like, screw this, we're just going to destroy everything. And what is worthy will rise again. So Durga is invoked as the ferocious warrior goddess, and she goes crazy. I mean, like, it's her nature to be crazy, to be undiscerning and just like destroy everything. So she's on the battlefield just wreaking havoc and is unstoppable. And she not only destroys the enemy, but she starts destroying everything else as well. And then we're sitting here going like, how do we stop her? And the only way to stop her, this is the most beautiful story, the only way to stop her is that an infant, a baby, is placed in the center of the battlefield that is complete destruction. And there's a little innocent, pure infant going, ah. And Durga stops and sits in the center of the destruction and nurses the baby. That's it. So, Durga Ma. Durga, 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 Jaya Jaya Ma. Durga, 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 Jaya Jaya Ma. Durga, 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 Jaya Jaya Ma. Durga, 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 Jaya All right, so there are movements that go with this, and I'll show you. I haven't asked her about this, but I'm going to ask Rahima to demonstrate with me because this is generally initially a partner dance that is based on a traditional Navaratri dance that is called Dandiya, and this is the battle of the ego. And so we'll show you what happens originally in the dance is that we each step, we are each other's egos in this that we are battling with. And so we first step in one direction, and then we smack. It's like the dance itself, the traditional dance, is that people are holding sticks and they're doing a battle with each other and hitting sticks with each other. But in the dance, we don't have sticks because we don't trust ourselves with sticks. We would hurt someone or poke an eye out. But instead, we use our hands as sticks. So we first would be stepping to our own right and battling the ego in that direction, and then to our own left and battling the ego in that direction, and then doing a turn of transformation. So we're just going to show you the timing of this so you can get a sense of it, and then I'll show you a modification that we're going to do in Zoom land for the Dandiya Durga dance. So it goes like this. Durga, 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 Jaya, Jaya, Ma. And then you would have a new aspect of the ego to battle with. Durga, 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 Jaya, Jaya, Ma. All right, so if you have people to smack hands with without hurting each other, please do. If you don't, or just for Zoom purposes, here's my modification for today, is that first we'll battle our own sense of ego on the right side of ourselves, and then on the left side of ourselves. And then instead of a turn, we'll just sweep the heart around in a circle to indicate our interest, our invitation of transformation. Okay, so like this. Durga, 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 Jaya, Jaya, Ma. Durga, 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 Jaya, Jaya, Ma. Ready? Durga, 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 Jaya, Jaya, Ma. 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 Still loving the soundtrack of life. Khabir.
Ooh, one must fall in love with her, huh? Yeah. Such a blessing to feel that energy and to know that we're fighting, we're struggling again and again and again. And how good it is to have these helpers on our side. Let's breathe a little bit in and out. And one of the nature meditations from Hazrat Inayat Khan. In red, I see the bleeding of thy heart in sympathy for thy beings. In red, I see the bleeding of thy heart in sympathy for thy beings. In red, I see the bleeding of thy heart in sympathy for thy beings. So let's visit one of my favorite story fairy tale characters. And maybe she is a Durga. In times past, there lived a king and a queen, and who said to each other every day of their lives, would that be great if we would have a child? And yet they had none. But it happened once that when the queen was bathing, there came a frog out of the water. And he squatted on the ground and said to her, thy wish shall be fulfilled. Before a year has gone by, thou shalt bring a daughter into the world. And as the frog foretold, so it happened. And the queen bore a daughter so beautiful that the king could not contain himself for joy. And he spoke and had a great feast settled up. Not only did he invite all his friends, relations, acquaintances, but also the wise women, and listen carefully, the wise women, that they might be kind and favorable to the child. There were 13 of them in his kingdom, but as he had only provided 12 golden plates for them to eat from, one of them had to be left out. However, the celebration was celebrated with all splendor, and as it drew to an end, the wise women stood forward to present the child their wonderful gifts. One bestowed virtue, one beauty, a third riches, and so on, whatever there is in the world to wish for. And when 11 of them had said their say, in came the uninvited 13th, burning to revenge herself, and without greeting or respect, she cried with a loud voice, in the 15th year of her age, the princess shall prick herself with a spindle and shall fall down dead. And without speaking one more word, she turned away and left the hall. Everyone was terrified at her saying when the 12th came forward, for she had not yet bestowed her gift. And though she could not do away the evil prophecy, yet she could soften it. And so she said, "The princess shall not die, but fall into a deep sleep for 100 years." Now, the king wanted to save his child, even from this misfortune. And so he gave commandment that all the spindles in his kingdom should be burnt. The maiden grew up, adorned with all the gifts of the wise women. And she was so lovely, modest, sweet, and kind and clever that no one saw her could help but love her. It happened one day, she was already 15 years old, that the king and queen have not been at home. And so the maiden was left behind alone in the castle. She wandered around into all the nooks and corners and into all the chambers and parlors, as she just wanted to do. At the very last, she came to an old tower. She climbed the narrow winding stair which led to a little door with a rusty key sticking out of the lock. She turned the key and the door opened, and there in the little room sat an old woman with a spindle, spinning her flax. "Good day, mother," said the princess. "What are you doing?" "I'm spinning," answered the old woman, nodding her head. "What thing is that twists around so briskly?" asked the maiden, and taking the spindle into her hand, she began to spin, but no sooner had she touched it than the evil prophecy was fulfilled, and she pricked her finger with it. In that very moment, she fell back upon the bed that stood there and lay in a deep sleep. And this sleep fell upon the whole castle. The king and queen, who had returned and were in the great hall, fall asleep. And with them the whole court, the horses in their stalls, the dogs in their yard, the pigeons on the roof, the flies on the wall, the fire that flickered on the hearth became still and slept like the rest. And the meat on the spit ceased roasting, and the cook, who was going to pull the scullion's hair for some mistake he had made, let him go and went to sleep. And the wind ceased, and not a leaf fell from the trees around the castle. Then round about the place there grew a hedge of thorns, thicker every year, until at last the whole castle was hidden from view, and nothing of it could be seen but the vane on the roof. And a rumor went around in all the country of the beautiful sleeping Rosamond, for so was the princess called. And from time to time, many kings' sons came and tried to force their way through the hedge, but it was impossible for them to do so, for the thorns held fast together like strong hands, and the young men were caught by them, and not being able to get free, died a lamentable death. Many a long years afterwards, there came a king's son into the country and heard an old man tell how there should be a castle standing behind the hedge of thorns, and that there a beautiful enchanted princess named Rosamond had slept for 100 years, and with her the king and queen and the whole court. The old man had been told by his grandfather that many kings' sons had sought to pass the thorn hedge, but had been caught and pierced by the thorns, and had died a miserable death. Then said the young man, "Nevertheless, I do not fear to try. I shall win through and see the lovely Rosamond." The good old man tried to dissuade him, But he would not listen to his words. For now the 100 years were at an end, and the day had come when Rosamond should be awakened. When the prince drew near the hedge of thorns, it was changed into a hedge of beautiful large flowers, which parted and bent aside to let him pass, and then closed behind him in a thick hedge again. When he reached the castle yard, he saw the horses and brindled hunting dogs lying asleep. And on the roof, the pigeons were sitting with their heads under their wings. And when he came indoors, the flies on the wall were asleep. The cook in the kitchen had his hand uplifted to strike the scullion, and the kitchen maid had the black fowl on her lap ready to pluck. Then he mounted higher and saw in the hall the whole courts lying asleep, and above them on their thrones slept the king and the queen. And still he went farther, and all was so quiet that he could hear his own breathing. And at last he came to the tower and went up the winding stair and opened the door of the little room where Rosamond lay. And when he saw her looking so lovely in her sleep, he could not turn away his eyes. And he stopped and kissed her. And she awaked and opened her eyes and looked very kindly on him. And she rose, and they went forth together, and the king and the queen and the whole court woke up and gazed on each other with great eyes of wonderment. And the horses in the yard got up and shook themselves. The hounds sprang up and wagged their tails. The pigeons on the roof drew their heads from under their wings, looked around, and flew into the field. The flies on the wall crept on a little farther. The kitchen fire leaped up and blazed and cooked the meat. The joint on the spit began to roast. The cook gave the scullion such a box on the ear that he roared out, and the maid went on plucking the fowl. Then the wedding of the prince and Rosamond was held with all splendor, and they lived very happily together until their lives end. So what are all those princes fighting the thorn hedges to enter, to wake the sleeping beauty? Is that sleeping beauty our true self? And is that 13th wise woman a face of Durga, starting that process of coming closer to our true self, to our true nature? La ilaha illallahu, 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 la illallahu, la ilaha 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 illallahu. Thank you, Sára.
Thank you, Khabir. Here's what Murshid has to say about Zikr. Are you ready? One of the many, many things. And this is from a somewhat rare set of, I don't know if I should call them papers, but it's instructions for the Murshid. That was Inayat Khan's explanations about practices and the spiritual life and how guides can tend to the lives of the Murids. So here's what Murshid says about Zikr. Zikr has a very great effect upon the heart. The heart may have any amount of stiffness, and this stiffness can be removed, and the heart melted by the practice of Zikr. For after the development, the power of Zikr enables you to even melt the hearts of others through your own practice. Now, if it is too painful, if doing Zikr and melting the heart is too painful, it can be cured by reciting Darood 11 times. I don't even want to tell you what that is right now, because right now I just want to invite the melting of the heart and the softening of all of the rigidities in the heart through Zikr. No, I'll tell you what it is, because that was not kind to just leave you hanging like that. So if it's too painful, you can recite the Darood, which this is what he calls the Darood in this context. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammadan wa ala alay Sayyidina Muhammadan wa barak wa salam. We're not going to sing that right now, but you could say that 11 times if you want. And also, for curing the pain in the heart, pouring and throwing the breath on the heart with full vigor. Pouring and throwing the breath on the heart with full vigor. When doing Zikr, think that heart is the divine. And each time that Zikr is repeated, the sun is rotating and spreading its rays. Feel that the heart is turning into light or fire. Here's that last part again. When doing Zikr, think that the heart is the divine with a capital D, that the heart is God. And each time that Zikr is repeated, that sun is rotating and spreading its rays. Feel that the heart is turning into light or fire. Okay. In our last few moments, we're going to touch into the atmosphere of Lakshmi. And she is the third of these Tree Devi, that is the three goddesses. And Lakshmi is the goddess of abundance and wealth. And anytime, like if you see all of these different images of the divine, of deities in the Hindu pantheon, you can recognize Lakshmi because she always has her hands pouring forth gold coins that are just spilling out of her palms. And so the embodiment of tremendous generosity. But important to remember that the wealth that Lakshmi is interested in is not that of the world. It is the wealth of spiritual attainment and spiritual abundance. So here's another passage from Murshid on the tuning of the heart and spiritual attainment. And this is from volume 14, which is called The Smiling Forehead. The first question is how to make the best of our life. Of course, that's the question. How to make the best of our life. How to make the best of this opportunity which is passing us by. Every moment lost is incomparably more valuable than the loss of money. As one will realize this, one will more and more come to the conclusion that one has gone on and on thinking one was progressing, but that one has been moving around in the same maze. If only one found the door, that door which is called by the wise spiritual attainment. However well educated one may be, however much progress one has made, however much one has collected or accomplished, however much power and position one has gained, only one thing is everlasting, and that is spiritual attainment. Without this, there will always be dissatisfaction, an uncomfortable feeling. Without this, there will always be dissatisfaction, an uncomfortable feeling. No knowledge, power, position, or wealth can give that satisfaction which spiritual attainment can give. In seeking God, in attaining spirituality, we do not need to use so much intellect, because this does not come by the intellect. It comes by the tuning of the heart. Okay, so the words for our for the last song I'm going to share with you for this unveiling session are going in the window. We'll sing Namostute. Namostute, that is again the same root of bowing to, of being empty of self before. Maha Lakshmi. Maha means great, like a big, profound, ultimate version of Lakshmi. Namostute. Lakshmi is her name. So there are a few symbols, images that I could convey to you, but I don't really have time. So, okay, the dance for this one is based on the arati, that's a puja, that is a fire ritual, in which you bring light, that is a flame that is burning in some kind of an oil, and that is brought into a dark temple, and where you find the icons, the images of the divine, and you sweep this light around them to illuminate every distinct detail of these images of the beloved. And so for this, I invite you to celebrate the light and to offer this blessing of acknowledgement to each other while we're singing Namostute, Namostute, Mahalakshmi, Namostute, illuminating the image of the divine. And then because she is abundance, well, there's an aspect of the dance where we're bringing our prayers, our devotions, and then that results in pouring forth blessings. So a rising up and then an offering forth. The last image is one of a lotus, that is the collective blossoming of the heart blossoming through our devotions. Namostute, Namostute, Mahalakshmi, Namostute, 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 Mahalakshmi, Namostute, 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 Mahalakshmi, Namostute, 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 Mahalakshmi, Namostute, illuminating Namostute, Namostute, Mahalakshmi, Namostute, Namostute. Khabir.
Thank you so much, Sára. Oh, dear friends, it's time to close this session, to express our gratitude and for you being with us. And you have a chance to express your gratitude by visiting one of our best pals, the PayPal. So thank you if you're sharing your gratitude with us. I have one last story to tell, and it's one of my favorite faces of the goddess, if you want to call it that way. And I'm going to tell you the short story. It's a story of a cook, and her name is Gretel. And it's really a Brother Grimm story. So I'm not, So she was a very good cook. She loved to cook, and she loved herself. I mean, she wore like shoes with red heels when she went out to dance, and she wore nice dresses, and she stood in front of the mirror turning and said, "Oh, look at me, look at you, aren't you gorgeous?" So this was Gretel. Now, one day her master, the guy she cooked for, he came home and said, "Gretel, I invited a guest. Please prepare 2 chicken for us." So she did. She slaughtered the chicken, put them on a stick, put them in front of the fire. And then she went down into the cellar to take a big sip of beer because she liked beer. So she was down in the cellar and drinking her beer. And then she came up to the oven again, looking at the chicken. And she was thinking to herself, well, if my master is not coming back pretty soon because he was gone out to fetch the guest, the chicken will be burned. And it's best to eat the chicken when they're juicy, so to put them away from the fire would be a loss. So what could she do? She thought by herself, you know what? I do have the best ideas with a sip of beer. So she went down to the cellar again and took a sip of beer. And then she came up and she was looking at the one chicken and she was thinking, the wing of the one chicken seems to be burned. I better eat it. So she took the wing off and ate the wing. Then she thought to herself, if the master is coming home and sees one chicken has only one wing, he knows something is wrong. So I better eat the second wing too. So she ate the second wing. And while she was eating, she was thinking to herself, well, who knows if they are coming home anyway? Maybe they went to some restaurant or whatever, and it would be such a loss of that 2 beautiful chickens. So she ate the one chicken and there was one left. Now she got thirsty, went down to the basement, got another sip of beer, went up again. And then she thought to herself, well, those 2 chicken belong to each other. And where the one chicken is, the other one needs to go. So she ate the second chicken. And it was really, really tasty and delicious. And so she had like her stomach filled with like these 2 good chicken. And the master came home right in that moment. And he said, you know what? The guest will be here pretty soon. Please prepare the 2 chicken. She was like thinking, okay, what could I do? And then she was listening and hearing in the dining hall how the master was sharpening the knives to cut the chicken, to prepare the chicken for his guest. In that moment, the doorbell rang and the guest was standing in front of the door. And Gretel, being the clever person she was or is, went to the door and said to the guest, if I were you, I would run. I mean, my master, he invited you to have chicken with him, but what he really wants to do is to cut off your 2 ears. Can you hear how he's sharpening his knife? So the guest thought, well, that's an invitation, and ran away. Meanwhile, Gretel went back to her master and said, you invited a nice guest. I was walking down with the 2 chicken the hallway and he opened the door, grabbed the 2 chicken and ran away. Now we don't have anything to eat here in the house. Now the master, what did he? He was running behind the guest and he was shouting, please give me just one, please give me just one, meaning one chicken, so he can have one chicken. The guest, he thought, please give me just one ear, you can have the other one. And he kept on running and running and running as if he had a hot fire underneath his feet. And who knows, maybe he is still running. So, sweet friends, thank you for being with us. Let's do the prayer khatum before we close. O thou, who art the perfection of love, harmony, and beauty, the Lord of heaven and earth, open our hearts that we may hear thy voice, which constantly cometh from within. Disclose to us thy divine light, which is hidden in our souls, that we may know and understand life better. Most merciful and compassionate God, give us thy great goodness, teach us thy loving forgiveness, raise us above the distinctions and differences which divide. Send us the peace of thy divine spirit, and unite us all in thy perfect being. Amen. Thank you so much.